Hello, everybody. It's very nice to have you in my session. People are joining in, so maybe just to start, if you could please use the chat box to say where you're from, right? Where you're joining from here. Okay, so Rashmi, the first one to say hi. Hi, Rashmi. So there is Poland, right? Great. And Pakistan, fantastic, thank you. Vietnam, Nepal, Chile, Ukraine, Germany, and India, right? So really a global audience. So it's nice to have you. I hope you're enjoying your day, whichever part of the day you're in. Like, is it afternoon? Is it early morning? And before we start, just a quick piece of information. You're going to receive the certificate confirming your participation in the session after the session in an email, so you'll get an email with a link to a certificate. So there will be certificates proving you have participated in the session. Good. Okay, so I think we can start. As you can see, there are two, communication boxes in front of you. In this panel, you've got a chat box and you have a Q&A box. So I'm going to monitor the chat box throughout the session today. So if there's anything that you want to share or that you'd like to ask, put it in the chat box. I will also use the chat box for some kind of communication with you, because there will be some questions I'm going to ask to you. So I'll be trying to monitor the chat box. There's also this Q&A box that you can see. If you have any question, anything that is not clear, you'd like me to get back to something, I will refer to this Q&A box after the session and just go and check the questions that might appear there, right? So chat box for just quick communication throughout the webinar, and the Q&A for some questions you might have to be addressed after the webinar. Okay, so PTE Academic, embrace reading challenges. So that's the topic of the session, but I'd like to start with a question that is a little bit more general and use the chat box to share your ideas. So what would you say? What are the challenges that students face when getting ready for an exam? From your experience, what would you say? What are the most serious challenges that they have to embrace when it comes to getting ready for an exam as such, right? So let's start with a general: anxiety, time management, nervousness, can't understand the text. We get back to reading later. I'd like to start with some general challenges when getting ready. Nervousness again, right? Time management, vocabulary. Okay, thanks a lot. Yeah, a lot of time management things. We're going to talk about it today, obviously. But first, I'd like to share with you, the four biggest challenges that I claim to be the biggest for my students when they get ready for the exam. So self-confidence, lack of progress, lack of motivation, fear of failure. So these are the four that I find the most problematic and the biggest challenges from my experience when I talk to students when they are getting ready for an exam. When it comes to self-confidence, obviously, how we can address this issue, obviously the lack of self-confidence or not feeling confident enough. Some of you mentioned that. So as teachers, obviously, we can promote growth mindset or divide the goals into some manageable steps, manageable chunks, so that they can get more confident. So these are some issues that have already been discussed in the sessions here. Then the feeling of lack of progress, and what can we do here? Obviously, the easiest way the teachers can deal with students' feeling of lack of progress would be providing regular assessment, regular feedback, so that they can see that they are really progressing on their way to the examination. Lack of motivation, another problem, another challenge when in my exam classes, those students who are getting ready for an exam, well, what can we do? One of the methods would be to introduce some engaging and meaningful content in the classroom. And the fear of nervousness, as you mentioned, right? There were a lot of you mentioned this nervousness, so fear of failure. What can we do? Promoting, supporting classroom environment where mistakes are seen as an opportunity to learn something rather than something terrible, or you can teach them some test-taking strategies, teach them the test format, show them, make this test familiar to them. So what we're going to do today, I'd like to focus on the last two elements. I'd like to talk about how to introduce engaging and meaningful content into the classroom, and how to work on some test-taking strategies. And today, well, obviously, we're discussing reading. So reading challenges. And another question already mentioned by you. Once again, what are the reading challenges? What would you say? A question to you. What are the reading challenges that you think your students have to embrace in the context of an exam, of a PTE academic? So vocabulary, fluency, comprehension, inferred meaning, grammar, speed, right, skimming, understanding, again, time management, new vocabulary, right? So yeah, so these are actually the challenges that you mentioned here, are the challenges that we're going to touch upon a little bit today. So I'd like to focus on four challenges when it comes to reading, the challenges that the students have to embrace when approaching PTE academic. And well, most of these have been mentioned in the chat. So vocabulary, well, a lot of you mentioned vocabulary. So they have to, well, face the difficulty understanding academic language and jargon with its specific vocabulary and grammar, right? We're discussing PT academics, so very specific kind of exam with a very specific style and this academic jargon, this academic vocabulary, specific grammar structure. This is one of the challenges that students have to face when taking PTE academic. Another challenge that we're going to touch upon today, it's and again, that was somehow some of you mentioned that, so they have to face this inability to identify the main ideas, key points, understand the structure of the text, right? So it's especially important when it comes to reading in an academic context where the texts are quite difficult when it comes to structure, when it comes to identifying ideas, main ideas, and key points. Another reading challenge that I'd like to discuss today is this necessity to demonstrate a range of reading skills, right? Especially skimming and scanning, but also a lot of other techniques. Some of you mentioned, like, for example, identifying inferred meaning. So there are, when discussing reading for academic purposes, the readers, they do have to show a lot of different techniques to deal with text. And the last one that many of you mentioned in the chat, you talked about time management. So this is it, right? So test takers or academic readers, I would say, they have to face this necessity to read a text quickly and efficiently, to comprehend it in a timely manner, right? Because we're discussing the context of an exam, so this timely manner is especially important here. So let's have a look at these challenges, and let's have a look at the first one and how to embrace it. So challenge number one, this challenge, once again, students may have difficulty understanding academic language and jargon with its specific vocabulary and grammar. When it comes to PTE academic, this challenge is especially visible in all those fill-in-blank activities where this knowledge of grammar, knowledge of jargon, specific grammar structure plays I would say the biggest role out of all the tasks that are present in part 2 reading PTE academic. So let's have a look at these tasks, fill in the blanks. For those of you who are relatively new to PTE academics, so that's just a quick reminder what it looks like. So we have a okay, so all right, here it is. So what we have is obviously the text that appears on the screen. There are several gaps, and test takers drag words from the box below to fill the gaps. That's one of the fill in the blanks task. And there's another fill in the blanks task that is reading and writing, a little bit different, where we have obviously the text on the screen again, several gaps, and you have to select the appropriate answer choice for each blank. So 2 fill in the blanks tasks. When it comes to scoring, there is a partial credit here for each correctly completed blank, and fill in the blanks reading and writing affects the scoring of reading and writing skills. So this is what fill in the blanks tasks look like. A little bit about the strategies for these tasks. So the strategies that we, the teachers, should help the students develop when getting ready for this kind of task. So skimming, that will appear a lot of times today. So obviously skimming is a crucial skill, just to get the idea of what the text is about, ignoring the blanks and getting the overall meaning. So that's the first step. That's the first important strategy when approaching fill in the blanks. Then obviously when looking at a blank, looking at a gap, there are some elements to be considered, like for example, grammar of the sentence. Are there any plural forms, parts of speech that can help us guess in which area of grammar we can be looking for? Is it a verb? Is it a noun? Is it a plural noun? Is it an uncountable noun, for example? So all those grammar hints that can help us identify the kind of word. Then some words around the help your students identify some words around the blank that indicate some logical connections, like, for example, conjunctions showing contrast, that, for example, the blank should contain a word that contrasts with some words before it. Also, collocations are very important strategy to develop academic or work on academic collocations. I'm going to talk a little bit about some methods of how to do it. So these are the strategies for fill in the blanks for dealing with this type of task and dealing with this academic jargon, academic vocabulary, academic grammar. And a few activities that will help us to develop those skills, and also some activities to help introduce some new content, a little bit more attractive, more meaningful. In some cases, also introducing the element of competition and fun, just to, well, spur the motivation. So, for the activities that I'm going to discuss today, you will need a lot of text, right? So if you're working with academic, with classes working on academic languages, for example, in my case, I do a lot of reading in my classes at university with my academic or well, graduate students. And so I have a lot of texts to use, or parts of text. So it's easy if you work with classes like that. If you want to take some shortcuts, right, you don't want to look for text, I have noticed that a great tool recently for generating text as well, very fashionable, ChatGPT. If you haven't tried it, well, for these activities, I think that might be a great tool. You can give very specific instructions, what kind of text you want, right? So, for example, how many words, that this is going to be academic style, also some questions that should accompany it, and you get a pretty good text from my experience. Obviously, you have to be careful, right? You have to monitor that, because sometimes, well, the content that appears contains sometimes mistakes or some surprising facts, but that's a great tool, right? If you haven't tried it for generating text for reading practice, this is a great tool. So let's have a look at the activities for embracing challenge number one, embracing this vocabulary and specific academic jargon. So the activity that I suggest for well, performing in class, students work in pairs, and you get they get two halves of the same text. So each student gets a half of a text. And then one student shares all, for example, nouns or some nouns. You give them, you tell them, like, for example, shade 3 nouns in your part of the text. And the other shades 4 verbs, for example. And they, after that, they exchange the shaded versions and try to guess the missing words in the text. So what about the verbs? If you received such a text, right? I mean the green shades. Can you guess the verbs in the text, right? So I want to activate you a little bit. And can you guess? Yeah, there is a remark that when you ask the ChatGPT what to do, how to get prepared, you may get some funny results. But what I mean, obviously, asking ChatGPT for some strategies to get ready for the exam, well, might not work very well. But what I'm saying, it's a great tool for generating texts, right? Because, well, like, for example, you know that multiple choice, you have up to 300-word text, and you can ask ChatGPT to generate 300-word academic text, which will have 2 multiple choice questions, for example. And you can get sometimes you can get really good results. I think that these are good. This text generating function or feature would be good for the activities that I'm sharing today. If you find it difficult to look for, like, text or short or long ones, right, you can use it, and it's a little bit faster, because generally with reading activities, it's quite time consuming for the teacher. They have to prepare a lot of reading. Okay, so let's have a look at the verbs. Leading, melting, right, rise, reached, higher. Higher is not a verb, right? Increased, risen. Okay, good, right. So rising, great, right, fantastic. Siren and begun. The verbs here would be warmed. The first one is warmed, have warmed at much higher rate than in the lower 48 states. Thawing, permafrost, and rising sea levels are beginning to leave parts of coastal towns underwater. Right, so this is, and this could be a competition, right? How many shaded options they will guess, for example, correctly. You can monitor that, and you can accept, for example, some other versions. This is also good for discussing some grammar hints, like this should be here ing verb, because this and this should be here a past formed verb, past tense verb because ed verb because this and this. This should be plural noun because this and this. You can discuss that. You can show them those hints that help them identify the proper proper word and proper form of the word. Another activity where you again need some text, a paragraph to practice towards fill blanks type of activity. You get a text and students read it and tell you the words they don't understand, right? So you preferably take a relatively difficult text and you put those words on display. Well, I know the blackboard, whiteboard, some kind of digital display, whichever you have. And then you give them 2-3 minutes to look up the words so they can consult dictionary and well, or mobile phones or dictionaries, whichever you prefer. And they check the meaning of these words, right? They can consult with you, ask. So there are those 3 minutes. And in groups, they create as many sentences as they can after the 2-3 minutes. So they compete which group will produce more sentences. But there are 2 conditions, right? So each sentence has to contain a word from the board. If you want to make it more challenging, right, with higher level groups, you can force them you can make each sentence use only the words from the text. So they have to manipulate the text, use the words from the text, and to create sentences. That will be a challenge, right? So you need a relatively high level group. There's a question from Urania, sorry. If I'm going to send you the handouts, right? So you're going to have the access to the webinar, recorded version of the webinar, today's webinar, and then after 4 sessions on speaking, reading, listening, and writing, there will be also a handbook with the activities available, right? So that will be in one PDF document. Okay, and one more activity, just to work towards fill in blanks, to work towards developing vocabulary. You have to hand out a text to your students, and you give them a time limit and let them use dictionaries. So let them use the mobiles or whatever dictionaries you have. And they just read it and they can consult the dictionary. They can also ask you some questions. So they check any difficult words. And after, well, the text has been checked, as if to say the words have been checked, student A says a word, right, that they have identified as a difficult word. For example, I know substance, let's say. And student B has to, well, one, say, right, this word, how this word is used in the text. So if you want more challenge, you can take, or you can ask the students to cover the text so they do not look into the text. Or, well, if you want less challenge, you can keep the text face up. So they have to say how it's used, like how it's, what the collocation, for example, was in the text. Plus, to give more challenge, they have to give examples of some other uses, some other collocations of the word. And again, a task for you. Can you give an examples and collocations of substance, how it collocates? Let me check it. Right. Let's see if you're with me. Toxic substance, radioactive substance, right. Soluble, chemical substance, exactly, right? So thanks to that, they go through, they say aloud, they say aloud some collocations with some difficult words. So this way they can practice those collocations. And an activity that is quite similar, but if you don't have a text and you don't want to prepare a text, you can have a similar activity in which you play collocation wars, where you use words from the list of collocations. As you probably know, there is you can download that easily from the website. There is this the academic collocation list available with, well, 40 something pages of academic collocations used in PT Academic. And you can, for example, take chunks of the list and ask, before doing this activity, you can ask your students to get ready, right? So study the collocation, a piece of collocation list, because the whole list is very, very, very big. And then in the class, right, as a roundup, for example, or a warm-up to your class, you can ask them to play the war in which they play in pairs or in teams. You give them the first element of a collocation, and their task is to continue one by one, like give collocations for the word, for example, complex. So you will have a collocation war like that. So, for example, they will be saying like complex area, complex issue, complex pattern, complex structure, complex system, and then until, well, one of the groups or one of the people in the pair work, they cannot continue. So they lose this and they lose a point, and the winner is the one who could continue until the end. So a little bit of competition at the same time going through the collocations. Good. Let's move on then to challenge number 2 that I mentioned at the beginning. So challenge number 2 is this fact that students may have problems identifying the main ideas, key points, or understanding the structure of the text. There is a remark from Schroeter that you cut out these collocation lists into component 1 and component 2 and mix them and ask in pair to make meaningful pairs. A great activity, a little bit of cutting, but obviously, yeah, exactly the same idea, like working with this collocation list. And this is the best way, like to go through the collocations as much as you can. And this way they stick, simply speaking, the collocations stick. So this challenge number 2 will be especially visible in the task in part 2 reading PT Academic reorder paragraphs, where they have several text boxes that appear on the screen, and in a random order, obviously, and test takers put the text boxes in the correct order. So simply they have to reorder a paragraph. Scoring here is partial credit, so they get a score for each correctly ordered adjacent pair of sentences. So that's a simple activity, reordering paragraphs, reordering sentences in a paragraph. And the strategy, the basic strategies that we should teach our students. First of all, skimming, again, getting the idea, just simply going through the sentences in the order as they are, just to get the idea of what the paragraph is about. And then, obviously, the crucial moment, like looking for the first sentence, this stand-alone sentence that will be the beginning of the paragraph, the sentence stand-alone, because it's well, easy to identify if you realize that this is the sentence that doesn't need anything else, right? There are no indicators in the sentence that there is that this sentence is connected to any other. So this is the first sentence, so-called stand-alone. And then, obviously, you go on and you look at some grammatical relationships like nouns, pronouns. So the following sentences will contain pronouns instead of nouns. Or, for example, the following sentences will contain partial names instead of full names, right? So you look for all those indicators that help you rearrange the paragraph, rearrange the sentences. You look for transitions between ideas, all those words, however additional, and therefore that show you how the sentences transit from one to another. And obviously they look for some traces. There might be some traces of sequence, some narrative, some process, some timeline, for example. These might also be there, and they will help to arrange the sentences in a paragraph. And an activity to help them with reordering paragraphs and to help them in embracing the challenge of difficult paragraph structure or text structure. You take a short text from the text you're working on in class, or again, could be generated by ChatGPT, and you cut it into sections or into sentences. It's the easiest way. So you get a pile of sentences. You have to have, I don't know, 4 or 5 copies of the same paragraph, and you play the game with 4 or 5 students. So you have a pile of sentences taken from a paragraph. Then you can add also 1 or 2 sentences not from the paragraph as distractors to make it a little bit challenging. And you can play a game. A trading game. So you have a group of students. Each student receives. So you shuffle, you deal out the pieces of the text, so they receive some sentences from the text, and the task is that they try to exchange the pieces by describing the sentences, what the sentence contains, what the sentence is about, not showing the sentences. So they say, I have on offer a sentence about, and they say what the sentence is about. So they are trying to exchange. So this is trading sentences. And obviously the winner will be the person who completes the text first. So again, a lot of competition, some new content. So this is rearranging, looking for the structure of the paragraph in a little bit different way, a little bit more engaging way, I would say. And sorry, okay. Yeah, there is, okay. And after this trading game, you can discuss the structure of the text and optional destructors, why these are destructors, why they do not fit the paragraph. And another activity that's in which they work on the structure of the text that will help them especially to deal with reorder paragraph activity or task in PTE Academic. You hand out a text to them, taken from your class or again generated by ChatGPT, and you give a short time to skim through the text. So right, that should be really short time, not too much, right? To also teach them this skimming, right? They have to just get the gist of the text. And you take the text back, optional, if you want a little bit more challenge, or you can leave the text with the students if you want less challenge, and ask them to draw a tree, or you provide a picture of a tree. So you introduce a little bit of a graphic element, which also always spurs the learning process. And they label the trunk and the branches of the tree based on the text. So you show them that the text has a real structure. It can be represented as a tree with some main trunk, main idea, plus some supporting ideas, the branches, and you can ask them to draw or to label them, and you will get, when you look at the text, branches that could be called open tract, nasal cavity, no restriction. But my question is, how would you label the trunk here? So look at the text, look at the slide, look at the text, and how would you label the trunk? Let me check the chat box. Right, quick look. Okay, vowel, all right. This is from Aditya, Bina, main idea of the text. Yeah, so the trunk is the main idea, but what is it? Vowel, again, scarce, vowels, right, great, fantastic. Thank you very much for engaging. So this is what you do. I mean, the best for me would be, I would prefer this activity to give, like, for a text like that, as short as that, I would give them 1 minute, maybe 1 minute and a half. not more, and would take away the text so that they are forced to do it quickly, just to skim and to like kind of picture the structure of the text. Obviously, the correct answer here is vowel. Yes, obviously that's a text. The main idea, the trunk, is vowel. So you introduce some new elements, some graphic elements, and some students might like this graphic element. Challenge number 3 that I mentioned at the beginning today. So students have to demonstrate a range of reading skills such as skimming, scanning, reading for gist, identifying writer's purpose. So these are the skills especially necessary for tasks that are called multiple choice. As those of you who have been working with PTE Academic a lot, you know perfectly well that there are 2 multiple choice tasks in PTE Academic Part 2 reading. One is multiple choice, choose single answer, right? So there's a text and one answer to be selected, one answer to the question. So after reading the text, they answer a multiple question on the content or tone of the text by selecting one response. And the scoring here is just correct or incorrect. There's another multiple choice task in which there are multiple answers, right? So after reading a text, they answer multiple choice questions on the content or tone by selecting more than one response. And here scoring is a little bit different. So this is partial credit. So they get a score for each correct response, but points are deducted for incorrect options. And this is a very important strategy to make your students aware that here points are deducted for incorrect options. So strategies, obviously, this is very important to start by reading the prompt, the question carefully, to get the idea what to read for. And then go through the options and highlight the keywords. The keywords in the options will be very helpful, especially with this multiple answers version, where they will help, the keywords in the options will help identify places in the text that contain the answer to the questions. And then after that, they should read the text to get the main idea and supporting points to understand the text and to look for the keywords or paraphrases, obviously, because the keywords will be most often paraphrased, the keywords from the prompt or from the options. And it's very important, especially here, especially in this task, I would say that from my experience that it's important that they do not focus on unfamiliar words, right? Because here it's the understanding of the text that is crucial, right? So if they focus too much, spend too much time on unfamiliar words, will make it too long, and they might simply fail if they focus too much on that. So some suggestion for an activity, you can take any multiple choice reading passage from, for example, past papers, and deal with it a little bit different way, I would suggest, not just giving them the text and asking them to give the answer, but I would start with highlighting some elements in the text. So I would highlight the extract that shows the correct answer in the text, and then I would highlight parts which relate to the wrong answers. And so I kind of reverse the item, right? So we start from the end, as if to say, not from the beginning. So we start from the place where this answer is, and this will help them develop the strategy of identifying places in the text that deal with particular options in the question. And obviously, students decide on the correct answer based on my highlight, as if to say, but also they have to decide which extract relates to which option. And then you can discuss why this relates to this option, in what way it is incorrect. That could be especially good for this multiple answer version, where you discuss which parts of the text relate to those incorrect answers and why they relate to the incorrect answers. So, just using past paper, but in a little bit different way. Another activity, a little bit more competitive, I would say, you take a longer text, you cut it into sections, and each student later gets a section of the text, and they prepare a question. So students become item writers. So again, we reverse the process of preparing the test. So they start from preparing items or test items. So they prepare one question based on the section that they have. And you put the questions, you collect the questions and you put them on display, right? Your blackboard, whiteboard, or digital display. And students put the sections, the text, back into a pile. And after that, they draw a new section and from the pile, right? And then they have to identify which question from the blackboard or whiteboard relates to my section, my new section that I'm right now holding. So, well, a little bit of could be done for time, right? So that the fastest student will get a point, for example. There's a lot of reading, a lot of reflection on how questions are designed, and at the same time, you can introduce some competition element. And the last challenge that I'd like to discuss, the one that a lot of you mentioned at the beginning when I asked about the challenges generally for the exam, but especially, I would say it's especially important for reading section, part 2 reading, where managing the time is a crucial factor. So students have to read the text quickly and efficiently to comprehend it in a timely manner, because that's an exam, right? So this time factor is important. This is they have 30 to 40 minutes to complete all the tasks for part 2, so they have to do it in timely manner. So strategies to help them manage their time. So make sure that students are familiar with the format, right? So how many items they're going to have, what the items are, so they will have an idea. You can work with them, right, together with them, and come up with an idea how much time they should spend on each part in an exam, and which part of the reading section. Skimming, yeah, I've mentioned that a few times. That will help them answer the global and detailed questions more efficiently later on. So they, if they skim the tasks, particularly each task in the reading part should be skimmed first by students to make this reading more efficient and at the same time quicker. Scanning for keywords, especially, right? Looking for in multiple choice section tasks, or also in fill in the blanks. They will also be helpful. So scanning for information, they will help them locate information faster and reduce time. And what I would say, the strategy that might be useful, help your students identify the types of questions they find easier and quicker to answer. Obviously, some students will be better at fill in blanks, some students will be better at multiple choice. Help them identify which tasks are easy for them and which tasks they maybe do not have to focus that much. Or spend that much time in the exam, which task maybe will require a little bit more time for them in the exam. And just a few activities on time management, and an activity, again, you have to prepare some texts, some short texts, could be sections of a longer text, obviously. I would say stake 7 would be a good number here. And what you do, you prepare one question for each text, but it's important that the answer should be one word. Why one word? Because you also have to prepare a crossword puzzle sheet where the words across are the answers to the questions from the text. So you prepare a crossword puzzle like that. And you run some kind of scavenger hunt, right? So timed, you can place the text in different parts of the classroom, for example, if you have a classroom, and you have timed reading stations. So they have a very specific time to read, like, I know, 1 minute, 1.5 minutes, depends how long the sections are, and they read and answer the question, and they complete the crossword. So they go around the classroom, they have a very specific time to read the question, give the answer. So that's a classic scavenger hunt. So you will have tasks like that. So look at well, one reading, let's say this is a reading station, you have 1 minute, you have a question, the number of the question from the crossword puzzle, and the question below the text. So what would you say? What would be number 1 crossword puzzle, number 1 across? So use the chat box, obviously. What fabric is manufactured using polymers? Great, Moiz was the first one here. Congratulations, you are the fastest. You have good time management. Yeah, right. Obviously, spandex is the fabric, and that's what they do. You give them 1 minute, for example, and they go from text to text, and this way they learn to read in timely manner. Right? They have to manage the text within, let's say, 1 minute, and they collect and they complete the crossword puzzle on the way. Also, think of giving them the very simple activity in which you give them a text and you shade words in the text just to reflect the situation in which they, for example, they do not understand every single word. So there's a text with gaps, and ask them to give them the time limit to read the text. And after that, give them some questions about the text. So again, they have to read within a time limit with not every word clear, because some words have been shaded. They give you the text away, or turn the text, put the text away, and you ask them some questions, especially like those skim reading questions, like what is the main topic of the passage, what is the purpose of the passage, how is the passage organized, especially those. You can obviously arrange the list. This is, well, the list suggested by me here, 10 questions, but I would focus for this activity especially on those first, I would say, 4 questions here that will relate skim reading of the text. So again, time limit and questions about the text will help them to manage the time. They will realize how much time they need to, for example, skim a text. And one more for time management task that you can perform with your class. You can prepare a list of sentences or time management tips, and you can work with your class. Obviously, the first element in the sentence in the tip will be a gap, and to be completed by do or don't, right? So you discuss together if these are do's or don'ts. You just give the ideas and they decide. Your students work on time management techniques by deciding if these are do's or don'ts. These are the 4 challenges I have discussed, and some activities, some strategies that that we have covered today. And well, just a few takeaways towards the end of our session. Remember, right, that your task as a teacher is help your students with vocabulary, work with academic collocations. We discussed a lot of activities that should help your students work with the collocations. Show your students how texts are organized. You remember, for example, this tree picture of tree task that we discussed. So show your students how texts are organized. Work together to identify key points, supporting ideas, right? To get them, to help them embrace this challenge of difficult structure of text, especially in an academic context. Then teach your students various reading techniques: skimming, scanning, identifying the purpose, identifying a writer's opinion, inferring the meaning, all those different reading techniques that they will find very useful. And one more takeaway, show your students how they can effectively manage the time while reading various texts. So practice with them, especially timed reading, so that they see how much time they need for different kinds of reading, like skimming, for example, or identifying the purpose or identifying the opinion. Right, so these are my takeaways. I'm just quickly looking at the chart, if there are any takeaways that you might have from today's session. And I'm switching to Q&A. Right, some of you were giving answers in Q&A. So there's a question: how many minutes should students spend on Phillips? Well, there is no, I would say, clear one answer to that, I would say, because, well, the general rule would be to complete each task as quickly as possible. The mathematics, if we employ mathematics and we calculate how much time there is in the part 2 reading and how many items there are, so that would be more or less, if you divide the time by the number of items, that would be more or less 2 minutes per item. But this is just mathematics, very general answer to that. That's why I suggested to work with your students and help them identify those tasks that they find easier, those tasks that they find more difficult, and they will spend the time accordingly, right? So a little bit more time with those that they find more difficult. So I wouldn't say how specifically how much time, because this is up to the students. We are actually preparing them to deal with the task rather than specifically saying them, so telling them, right, you have to spend exactly 2 minutes. Mathematics, when you employ it, then it says more or less 2 minutes each task, but obviously that will vary from a student to student. So this is what I would say. There is a question from Pretty. What about the students who are unable to understand the sentence? Obviously, that depends. If these are like many sentences, well, the simplest answer to that would be to work on, if this is like the problem with understanding most sentences, for example. So the simplest answer would be, first of all, work on vocabulary, right? So build this vocabulary repertoire in your students, and based on that, then you can move on to work on showing the structure of the sentence, how it is built grammatically, how it works within a text. So that that requires working and showing them all those processes, all those elements in a sentence, in a text. Then Q&A. What is the best platform for students to prepare? That's a question from Bashra, for PTE tests. Well, if you go to PTE academic website, you get a lot of fantastic material there to get your students ready. Well, you will find this collocation list, for example. You will find some lesson plans to work on strategies to work with your students. You will find links to some great material, books, printed books that you can order, recommended by PTE Academic. So I would say that, well, the best place to look for the material would be, well, first of all, this PTE Academic website. Is multiple choice question important in the exam? There is a question from Iswaria. Well, obviously it is, right? Every question here is important. We are testing how the students function in the academic context, right? Because we want the students to do the best, not only in the exam. We want our students to do the best later on when they use their exam to, I know, to get into university or get a job, and we want them to function in this environment. And this well, this exam is supposed to, well, to see how well they function in this context, and also to motivate the students to learn and to get really ready for the academic and work environment. How students can do scanning if they are not good at vocabulary. Well, obviously, just as I said, that's clear that there will be some vocabulary items that they won't be able to, well, they just simply don't know. So a very important technique, a very useful, I would say, technique or strategy for that is do not spend too much time on those elements that are unfamiliar with. So so scanning, we're looking for the elements and that we know, the items of vocabulary, and we build out of those elements that we know without losing time on unnecessarily focusing on unknown items. So there's a question also, how students improve the vocabulary. Well, obviously, you can employ a lot of techniques as a teacher. I showed you a few activities that can, for example, that can improve the collocation, knowledge of collocations. Like, for example, this collocation wall that I showed you, that you divide this collocation list into chunks, and you ask them to learn, for example, the chunks of the list, or the ones that you find most useful, and then you revise, right? Obviously, revision, learning and revision is crucial for increasing your vocabulary. Multiple choice answers, a question from Madhur. Multiple choice answers are quite difficult. How to manage? Well, this is what I said. Yes, they are quite difficult. As I said, they have to employ a lot of reading techniques. Obviously, the questions could be of different kind. There could be a question about if something is true or not. There could be a question about what, for example, the writer's opinion is. What there will be questions about some inferred meaning as well. So that's why, as I showed, it's very important to just teach them some kind of strategy from the very beginning. So read the question first, get the idea what the question is about, what you're reading for. Then look at the options and identify the options, identify the keywords in the options. Then go to the text, right? So do not start with the text. First the question, first the options. Go to the text. Go through the text, identify the places that refer to the keywords from the options, and you can focus on those places, and well, you can find the keywords as they are, or paraphrases of these keywords. And when you have those places, you can then focus on those and eliminate, for example, wrong options by that. So some strategy, some plan of working will definitely help. And well, besides, obviously, reading, right? Just reading as much as possible. Obviously, it will be the best prescription here to deal especially with multiple choice. Total time duration, that's the question here from Boomi, right? And well, obviously this is from 32 to 41 minutes. Overall, all those 5 tasks, depends on how many items, because each task can have more than 1 items. That depends on the task. And there's a question from Aditya, can we use ChatGPT for generating text for students' practice? As I said, I wouldn't overuse it, right? Obviously, there are a lot of, I'd say, drawbacks of ChatGPT, but for these activities that I showed you, where you have to, where you need, for example, a text that you cut into sections, for example, or where you have a text and you need one question for the text, for example, that's I would say that saves your time, right? And instead of looking for texts, right, in the material that you're covering, for example, in class, you can easily give the parameters to ChatGPT, what kind of text you need, how many words, what style, and what question you need. You get a nice text for this kind of, let's say, fun activity. So from time to time, I would use ChatGPT for maybe those, especially those activities that you perform to compete, to have a little bit of fun. I would say that my experience with ChatGPT, well, the way it works, because it's kind of ChatGPT works on a huge database where there are a lot of chunks of language. So if you say, I want some academic style text, for example, you get you can get a lot of great chunks of academic jargon, collocations, expressions, right? So, so that could be useful. But I wouldn't overuse it. Still, there are some drawbacks. And maybe one more, is collocation beneficial for fill-ups? Yes, I would say definitely, especially for fill in the blanks. When you look at these tasks, a lot of them are based on academic collocations. Obviously, there are some other elements tested here, just as I said, like grammar or some vocabulary. But collocations are a huge part here, and definitely very useful. Right. Okay. I think we are running out of time. I don't want to keep you here for hours and hours. Thanks for being with me here, and please join me for the next session in a month, the 11th of July, overcoming listening or embracing listening challenges. So we'll be discussing listening, part 3, listening. So thanks a lot for today. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for engaging in some tasks here. That was great having you. Enjoy the rest of your day, be it evening, be it early morning, because we have participants from all over the globe, I would say. So have fun. Thank you very much.